it doesn't matter what your story is. And that's what I keep trying to say to my COVID bro, who's like, yeah, he's like, my final night of drinking was just me hanging out with my friend with a bottle of Gentleman Jack, and my wife just got sick of it. Next thing I know, I'm intervention and she's throwing me in a rehab. And he's like, I didn't even do anything wrong. But he's like, and then I look at him, I'm like, but was alcohol the controlling and factor of your life? Was every moment of your life revolved around when your next drink was going to occur? And he's like, absolutely. I was definitely in the death grips. So, all right. I think we got this here.
We got this, bro.
Well, this is the Sobriety Daily, Rob and Drew Do Sobriety podcast is what this is.
It is.
And I am a classic sobriety person. Rob is not. So,
I mean, let's define classic and what is not, Drew.
Well, I'm a classic sobriety person. So when you think sobriety, you think AA, you think big giant blue book, you think of a bunch of people and some bad coffee, you think support groups,
right.
You think
some birthday cookies and cake.
There's no cookies and cake, dude. I mean, like maybe there's like the 3-day-old donuts from the grocery store. You know what I mean? You think rehab?
Not an AA? I'm down for those donuts. Don't even.
So your kind of sobriety though, like, cause you've been sober. So tell me, just give me the 30-second, like your sobriety, and then what does your sobriety look like, generally speaking? And because I know it's a defining element in your life. It's like what you do. Your nonprofit is about it, but you're not a classic sobriety guy. So just tell me a little bit about that.
Even though, I do receive and respect the classic sobriety, if that's how we're categorizing it, because of what I do and the people that are coming along in the mission with us. But, for me, I'm a very faith-driven sobriety guy. My relationship in sobriety stemmed from just saying have like a Jesus moment, you know what I'm saying? And that was the ultimate shift in my life. But I needed a few of those moments, you know what I'm saying, in order to get where I'm at today. But also, too, I'm very mindful of what I identify as or label myself. I like freedom from particular titles. And so, but that's just me. That's me.
We can have that debate. You and I, we've had that debate before, haven't we?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it was more of a constructive conversation and respecting each other's positions. Yeah, we just see it different, right? What's that? It's okay, brother. Yeah. It's okay. That's what this is for. So, no. You've shared your position, your stance, and your understanding, and I've done the same. And we've come to the place where it's like, yo, bro, let's do a podcast together. So whatever, right? It works. It works.
Well, that's why.
And you get to hit a target audience that I may not get to, and vice versa, right? So, exactly. But the goal is to have a collective big target audience to help as many people as possible, and then those individuals can take the nuggets that they get from us and apply them to their recovery.
Yeah. So just to cover how it is that we wound up at the same spot. So a lot of people in my classic recovery space, kind of the cult of Alcoholics Anonymous kind of thing, which I'm totally fine with, by the way.
I'm not.
No. What I mean is, I mean people calling it a cult. Like, I'm okay with that. Like, I've emotionally accepted that. I have moved on.
This is why I love you though, bro, because the things that a lot of individuals that are associated with that are afraid to address, like, you're just like, yo, it is what it is, and this is what we're going to call it. So let's call it that and move on. Let's go.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. So it is what it is. And I'm okay with that emotionally. Yeah. But on the other hand, if you take it one step up in terms of how AA came to be, Bill Wilson said that Carl Jung is one of the godfathers. And Carl Jung said that in order for a guy to get sober, all he needed to have was a vital spiritual experience.
Which is what I have.
Which is why you and I are totally aligned.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're totally aligned because you said, hey, look, I had to have a series of experiences. And in your sobriety, right? Jesus is that thing, that gateway wherein you receive that spiritual experience. For some other people, right, their spiritual experience was different, right? And they experienced God in a different way. That didn't make their sobriety less effective.
Correct.
But so what you and I chase, and I think what we're really talking about is a vital spiritual experience that becomes the guiding light by which we choose to live our lives,
Right.
recognizing that sobriety is key in that experience for
Correct.
us. It's a very individual decision.
Correct.
Alcohol is a bad idea for me. Drugs and alcohol is a bad
I
idea
mean,
for
well,
me.
may as well. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I'd like to say it's a bad idea
Okay,
for
there's no,
everybody.
and I come out of, I honor and respect, with what I'm building and everything that I've come out of and the understandings and interactions that I've had with other individuals. I understand there is that guy, there is that woman that can have the occasional drink because alcohol just didn't do that to them, but they are coming out of some other kind of experience or trauma that needed to be addressed and they're recovering from those things. So I think my perspective, I was talking to my buddy yesterday, he's a psychotherapist, and he said, bro, you just have like this new age approach to recovery. I'm like, new age, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't call Jesus new age, but I know that it's a different understanding and approach because I don't have the structure of the 12 steps, and I'm willing to connect and work with people that are and are not part of that structure.
Yeah, absolutely. So and it's very different than the structure that we work under.
Yes.
Uh, and why by we I mean specifically me and my sponsor and my sponsees. We are in the very hardcore space of, you know, if you don't do your work, we will yell at you. We will ask you, when we sit somebody down for the first time, they like uh, somebody who like just literally like got off their intubation and like just got out of rehab. They'll be like having their first morning with us, and we'll look at them right in the eyes and be like, "Are you ready to save somebody's life?" And they're like, "I feel like I'm dying," and you're like, "I don't care. You're here now, so we're going to prepare you to save someone else's life. Are you ready for that journey?"
You're planting seeds of purpose in someone's life. That's
I
pretty
mean,
awesome.
and that's the way my sponsor taught me. And my sponsor is one of those hardcore, like, not Hell's Angels, but the classic, biker tattoos,
Yeah,
very intense character. Now he's, very like lovable grandpa that if you like, poke him too much, he'll bark at you really loud. But like, so I have that kind of sponsor, right? And very kind of classic. But
well,
we're really intense.
and I think the individuals that have led those darker, deeper, drastic, traumatic lives, once things line up for them, I feel like they can be some of the world's greatest game changers, And I know that as we carry on through our conversation, I'll get to share a little bit about like my background, my story, and what led up to today. But I feel like sometimes the darker your life has been, man, you just have appreciation for that light and you want to give it to everybody, man.
I mean, that is there's two ways I look at this. Like, so your story is much more dark than mine, right? And when I go to eventually share my story too, my story is much more like a really bad Woody Allen movie. Like, like it really is. It's just it's like a bad Woody Allen movie. Like, there's nothing about my life that was that bad or terrible. And then it's like I meet the guy. You know who the guy I meet? I see him all the time in AA. And I'm not a representative of AA. I just think I'm gonna talk about it because I'm okay with that. What I see all the time is the guy who started drinking during COVID and
Mm,
just started wondering if he could have a beer before his first Zoom meeting.
mm,
And then he was having 10 beers, right? And that's the guy I see all the time now. His story is so boring. He
right.
was just an insurance adjuster. He's just a, accountant, low level mid manager. Started drinking during the day, can't stop now. His life is just, completely falling apart.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, what story do I have to share to save someone's life? My life's not that bad. Like, yes, my life is completely falling apart. And I'm like, bro, there are millions and millions of men in America, just in America, whose lives are completely collapsing because of the COVID drinking thing.
Right.
Your story is so necessary
Right.
because it's not the hardcore one. And then you got guys like you that like the world needs, so the world needs all of our stories. They need
Correct.
the war
Yeah.
story and they need that COVID boring sobriety story.
Well, because you know what people have a tendency to do is compare. I think it's in our nature to compare. So a lot of times people will come to me after I've just spilled my guts and just vomited my story and and the depth and the pain and the trauma, and they'll be like, "Well, I never had it that bad." Well, here's the deal. Like, this isn't a storytelling pissing contest. That's not what we're doing here. Find something in that story that's relatable and apply it to yourself, and that's the importance of everybody telling their stories. And here's the thing, how many people collapsed during the whole COVID situation and need to hear those COVID situation collapse stories? Because
Oh
some of
yeah,
us didn't, right? So I can't necessarily provide the help someone may be looking for because that's not my story, right? But there is somebody that can.
absolutely. And that's, I like stories that are of the hyperbole story. Like,
Yeah.
you know, um, so it's the same idea. So your story is the same idea as like your classic rehab guy. But then if you were to like keep playing the story out, but somehow the person like can't die, that's your story. Like like if you give give a rehab
Feel
guy
like I
like
just
fear
became like
and
a recovery superhero out
yeah,
of
yeah, you're like an addict alcoholic who has like a game genie, so like you can't die, but you can make your life really, really, really
unlimited lives. Boom, boom, boom.
yeah. Well, I mean, so yeah, so just hit the Narnar points of your story, not the 1 hour version, like the 2 minute
Yeah.
gnarly version, like that ends
That-
up with you like your face next to a drain or something.
well, it's yeah, I definitely have the Cliff Notes story,
Me
Cliff
too.
Notes version where I just hit bullet points. I got to a point, man, where I was telling my story so much and getting in depth so much. It was actually exhausting, man. Um, and then, I no longer desired to be have all the eyes on me, all the attention on me. Like, for 45 minutes on stage, just like Rob is telling his story. And I know there's power in it, but it got to a place for me where I'm like, you know what? I want to do more of this right here. I want to do more of interacting and engaging and have someone ask me questions. Here's something in my story that they're like, hey, let's do that right there. I've never wanted my story to become stale for myself. And I noticed that when I was telling my story, at certain points, like, I just didn't want to go certain places anymore because I'm just like, man, it's exhausting telling my story all the time. And so there's a time and place. I just don't tell it to its fullness all the time. And there's a lot of rabbit holes in my story, as you know, and you know how my mind operates. So it's really easy for me to go down 3 or 4 different rabbit trails at one time and then have to circle back around to figure out where I was and where I was going with it all. So
No worries. So I think the well, do you have like a 20-second version?
okay, yeah, I got
Because
it here.
the reason why I'm saying is because it's still on a foundational component in terms of just putting this on the internet and people getting to know us,
Yeah.
understanding you as the uh did you know that Saint Francis and Thomas Aquinas
Yes.
were live at the same time?
Yes.
And as much as I would love to be Francis, I'm not. I'm just not. You are much more of an ascetic, passionate kind of guy.
Mhm.
And you have that kind of unbelievable caring nature about you and in that way, which I think makes your sobriety so well intoxicating. You have like an intoxicating sobriety to be around for
Right.
sure, which is very Francis of you.
Yeah.
Whether I like it or not, I'm very much an Aquinas. And what that means is like I just love to study and to read and to like write dissertations on the thing, and so I like that we're bringing these two approaches. Like there is an intellectual book, like I mean, shoot, what I learned in the program has is literally the same work I'm continuing on my PhD right now,
Right.
right? So it's like how far can you take the rabbit hole of learning in this stuff? Well, it turns out you can go really far, or you can do what you're doing, which is just stay passionate and then kind of in the moment. And the world kind of needs both of us, right?
Well,
So
you know, you're in a sense, if we were to relate this to religion or faith or whatever, you know, you have the evangelist and then you have the pastor, right? You have the teacher and then you have the guy that just pours his heart out over everything, right? And so
yep.
I think we bring those two elements to the table. You know, and I'll do my best. You know, I'm very deep in my faith. I love to share my faith. It's foundational to who I am. So I'll always do my best not to start rocketing off into my own personal evangelistic sermons.
Yeah, it's challenging, right?
It
So
is challenging, but
I'm a Christian, right?
yes,
But when I get a new sponsee, the first question I ask them is, do you have a higher power? What is your relationship to that higher power? Um, and is there a particular lens that you would like to learn sobriety through?
right,
If you want to learn through a Buddhist lens, I have enough of a Buddhist lens that I could walk them through it in that way, and that I'm okay with that.
right.
You know, we can do a Catholic thing, we can do a whatever thing, whatever they want to do, that's okay. My dad was a prison chaplain for 30 years. So he had to facilitate the Wicca and the Odinist and, Muslims and Christians. He had to facilitate all of it, right? Native American worship.
Yep,
So when he had to facilitate all that, he taught me how to do that. And
right.
because at some point it's about loving people and meeting people wherever they're at,
You're
right?
100%. You know, it's funny because the church establishment will mold the way that you think and approach people, right? And it was almost having an epiphany or a revelation or a deeper relationship with God where I had to kind of walk away from the church mindset in order to be able to connect with the demographic that I was truly born to connect with. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So, and I
It's
think as
difficult.
time goes on, we'll talk about, you know, as two men that are believers, like the challenges and that we've seen being a part of the church or the religion called Christianity, right? We'll be able to touch
You
on
could
some.
even call it the cult of Christianity. I'd be
Yeah,
okay with that too.
right.
Like,
Yeah. You know,
so,
yeah.
well, the dogma. So I remember for me, it is in fact when your dogma is the primary foundational component of how you view God, there's a problem.
I agree 100%.
And I think that's the main thing is that uh so in scripture we have two words for the word of God, right? So we have the logos and we have the rhema, right? The logos is the written word of God and the rhema is the spoken word of God, right? And so when the Bible says that the letter kills but the spirit brings life, it's talking about the logos.
Yeah.
The rhema is the experiential moment, that aha moment, right? When you're sitting there and you're like, and like you can hear God like inside of your being speaking to you,
Yes.
that's the rhema, right?
Yeah.
So we have to have a living relationship with God where
Correct.
we are able to hear that. And then at the same time, we also have to have enough book knowledge
Right.
or foundational knowledge that gives some kind of structure to it that makes it enjoyable. Is the book knowledge 100% necessary? No, but it is helpful
Very
like
helpful.
framework.
Well, you know, and then you like start dealing with certain camps of like the one that's just strictly into the spirit and the word and God talking to us all, the charismatic side, right? Man, they can get super carried away with a lot
Running
of
on
stuff,
thin water
bro.
there, bro.
Right? What's that?
So are you. Are you not charismatic?
I'm very passionate. But there's also the flip side to it of, you know, the studious, you know, literature, the word of God through the scriptures where people can become extremely legalistic. And I think for me, you know, I'm very outspoken about my faith. But I'm not into rolling on the floor and you know, just popping people with the spirit and
Missing out, bro.
You know what I'm saying? Well, right, like I'm very mindful, I hope we're not losing listeners already. Like that's
Yeah, I heard some funny
so
stuff the
yeah.
other day.
Well, let's do
Yeah,
this. Let's do this. Because I can go off on that tangent. I think that, our relationship with God is our relationship with God. There's stuff on both sides that I find to be very fruitful, and then things that aren't so fruitful and that are man driven, and a false illusion of having a relationship with God, right? And I choose to walk my journey to where, like, hey, how can I always connect with you and give that to other people? I should be able to walk with God and allow him to work through me without always, without Bible thumping and stuff like that. So my little, I guess my elevator pitch about my testimony would be I was raised by my stepdad. He was abusive. Um, my parents are both heavy drinkers, heavy users. There was a lot of fighting and chaos, abuse in my house that led to, trauma. And then eventually it led me to my own path of drug and alcohol abuse. My very first experience with a young lady, I watched another man take advantage of her in front of me. And I really deeply cared about this young lady. And that man gave us alcohol for my very first time. I was about 14 years old. And because of everything I had witnessed in my house, and I was molested at 8 years old, I started getting into pornography about 9, 10, 11. So I already had this warped image of intimacy and sex and relationships with women. And then my first experience, and then within that first experience, I was introduced to alcohol, which eventually, once that door of alcohol, and I don't believe that alcohol is the gateway drug. That's just me personally. I believe that my trauma and my seeking for something was my gateway drug. My need for connection and validation was my gateway drug. Um, but then I started drowning things out, and then within that became new habits, and I started programming myself, and I felt like I can't do anything without using and drinking it, and that went on for 20 years, man. That went on for 20 years. I think at about year 15, 16 is when I got so deep into troubled relationships that I got engaged into a relationship where I put myself in a situation where I was falsely accused of rape and attempted murder, which led to a suicide attempt. In that suicide attempt, I ended up severing my spine, breaking my arms, collapsing my lung, and I was told I'd never walk again. If I did, I'd be
strong
fully.
attempt.
What's that?
I said that was a strong attempt.
It was a strong attempt. My foot clipped an awning on the way down, changing my fall. So,
Oh, it changed
but
your trajectory.
well, yes, it did. It changed. Yes, it did. Um, I felt it was the hand of God. So, um, yeah, it was, I call it God's awning. It's funny because an awning, right? Do you know what awning means, Drew?
For covering over you.
That's good. I like it. I like it. So protection, a covering, right? Protection and covering, right? So my foot clipped and awning changed my fall. Well, now I'm given all these pain medications. So this guy that loves to numb himself doesn't want to feel any kind of pain physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it is. Now you've given me more. And so then I spent the next 4 years trying to rehabilitate my body and spirit and emotions while adding the drugs and alcohol into my system, and eventually met a young lady, got behind the wheel of her car, crashed her car into a house, ran from the scene of the scene of the crime, and big God moment number two. So big God moment number one was saving me from a suicide attempt. Big God moment number two was um, meeting me under that house in my intoxication, breaking through my drunkenness and like speaking straight life into me. And in that moment is when my desire to drink and use was completely removed from me, because I realized that I should have been dead. Um, I had my body back. I was off all the pain medications. The one thing I wasn't doing was I wasn't handing over certain things to whom I believe was a creator that loved me deeply. And it was time to pass that over. And so I negotiated. I negotiated under that house. And I said, hey, if you bail me out of this situation, which you don't have to because you're a righteous judge and I deserve to lose it all, the girl, the job, everything. I was in a great place in life. But if you bail me out, I'll never do it again. And in that moment, it was like this weight just came off me, and I knew I'd never go back to it. And so that was more of my sober journey. The harder part was unpacking all the abuse, the trauma, the molestation, like all that other stuff. That was the harder stuff for me to navigate through, right? And so, now I'm what, 15 years out from that? 15, no, so 15 years out from my suicide experience and about 11 years from drinking and using, and in that meantime, it's all the healing that took place, the studying, the interacting, and then the recovery stuff for me, because I'm a recovery coach, and I'm state certified through Colorado. Um, those doors started to open. I didn't have to go chase those opportunities. Those opportunities came to me because there were people that heard my story, saw what I was doing with my life. They were completely astonished and amazed. And they're like,
Yeah.
we need you to give that to other people.
Right.
And so that's my best version without going down too many rabbit trails.
That's good. No, that's really good. It's perfect. Well, because what I tell people about sobriety is that sobriety, like stopping drinking, that is the beginning of sobriety. That's not
Scratching the surface, right? Like,
so once you right, it is the so and that's why I'm in this case, so my story, right, is a very kind of big bookish because I had all these experiences with God. By the time I realized I needed help, I had been all over the world doing missions trips. I'd smuggled Bibles into North Korea, like at some
yeah,
point in time when I was like 20 or like
pretty
16.
savage. Yeah, I think that's pretty.
Um, yeah, like and I had been doing ministry stuff for many years. Like on the other hand, like there was nothing that could stop it. So there was no, for me, there wasn't an amount of book knowledge that was going to change anything.
Right.
Right. It was the problem was in my mind. And I don't have an assault trauma story. I just have basically in my brain this thing that I became like obsessed with. I wouldn't say obsessed with how other people view me, but more just like a general discontentment and dissatisfaction and like resentment towards life itself, right?
Yeah.
Here I am, like I'm a spiritual person, but yet I can't stand my life. I was in a marriage that wasn't something that I wanted. I wanted to get a divorce. I didn't know how. You know what I mean? I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to didn't know how to move forward in my life.
Right.
And I knew I had alcoholism in my family, and I thought, yeah, I can just drink. And that led to just basically, I couldn't figure out dogmatically how to get a divorce. So I just decided I would just drink my way into one. And the problem with that, of course, is that really opened the door. So I'm one of those people. I'm of the screw it variety. Like,
Way to clean it up. Yeah, I like it.
I got to clean it up a little bit. Because that was it.
Organic.
I'm just of that variety. Like, screw it. Like,
Yeah,
whatever. Like,
yeah,
I'm done. At some point, I was like, I'm done pretending,
yeah,
and I don't care anymore. And
yeah,
if God is who God says He is, then my decision doesn't matter that much on this level.
yeah.
Because I was just like, and I just basically was like, I'm out. A long time, man. I spent 4 years basically sitting at the beach every day, just sitting there waiting for some sort of magical purpose to show up
Mm.
and just waiting for something.
The, the,
Eventually,
the purpose comes in the work, though, right? Like you start
oh yeah,
to,
you would think that is the case. However, what I always knew is that if I engaged in any sort of work, I knew that alcohol would come back to haunt me. So I knew that any success I ever had in life, alcohol was going to come up behind me and ruin it.
yeah,
Until I could figure out this issue of so I believe that there are four fundamental factors that every man, getting into some masculinity talk, four fundamental factors that every man has to overcome. That is his relationship with drugs and alcohol, his relationship with money, his relationship with sex, and his relationship with technology.
mm,
And if you or if I as a man do not fully understand my relationship with those four elements, when I achieve some sort of success or some responsibility or something that actually is going to start driving that forward, one of those four things is going to come up and knock me out.
Right.
And that's why it's not good, in my opinion, for young men under age of 30 to really get a strong position of leadership, because by the time you're 30, there's no way you have drugs and alcohol and sex and money and technology understood within yourself and surrendered to God.
Right.
So knowing that alcohol was eventually going to come up and take me out eventually, I basically was sitting on the beach waiting for either the alcohol to take everything from me or for God to take the alcohol from me. Either one was fine with me. Just not a life where both existed at the same time.
It's, it's funny. I used to pray for God to take the alcohol away from me and the drugs because I was too weak in the mind to do it myself. That was one of my prayers. And when I met my wife, so the girl's car that I crashed, she became my wife. Yeah. But I remember our first date. I was heavy, dude. I bought a pitcher of beer, man. I bought a pitcher of beer, and she goes, "What's that for?" And I was like, "Oh, that's for me." She's like, "Oh, I don't like that," and I'm like, you know what I'm saying, like, eh. And I knew what I'd been praying about, and my first thought was like, "Man, God, are you going to use this woman to help get me sober?" Well, turns out, man, her mom and mom's husband, my father-in-law, my other father-in-law, they were like, at the time, bro, they were like 20 years AA, so she had grown up in that structure. She had grown up in sobriety, you know what I'm saying? And here I am in this moment now of like, well, let's see what happens from here, kind of thing. But I knew somewhere along the lines that that relationship was going to be involved in my
Was your
sobriety.
wife eventually critical in you in your walk in recovery?
Was she?
Yeah.
She was never really critical. I mean, it's so crazy. Alyssa actually, 2 weeks before I crashed her car, she quit drinking. She said, "I don't want you to drink anymore, so I'm not going to do it. So I'm not going to encourage it." So her sober date's actually 2 weeks longer than mine, but we don't celebrate hers because hers didn't destroy her life, right? It wasn't this huge accolade, this huge breakthrough, but in the sense of like love, like it was big there. It was
But she
super.
definitely like cleared the way.
It did. It showed me where her heart was in all of it. And even after I crashed her car that her grandpa bought, who had just recently passed away, right? Like, she had the grace in her heart to, what are we going to do from here on out? Because we wanted to be with each other, but she also knew that there was no way that she could be with a man that was drowning his sorrows away.
Right.
Uh, and so, but it worked out because, within a year after that, we were married and started having kids. And, so she's always encouraged. But the thing about my wife is she doesn't, she can't relate to a lot of um, my childhood traumas and stuff like that. Like, and where it all came. She understands as a compassionate person, but as something relatable, it's hard for her to relate. And my wife's about 12 years younger than me too. So there's a whole nother element of life that I live. Because I drank and used from 14 to 34. That's 20 years of abuse, man. And to think of like from 0 to 14 is where I saw all that trauma. And then I started like, numbing all that trauma. And by the time I was 34, yeah, I was 34 by age, but how much of that, there was a little boy that lived inside of me. There was a little boy that never got to grow up. There was a little boy that never addressed a lot of the childhood issues and the struggles and challenges of life and always ran. I was a runner, bro. And so then from 34 to what I'm now 45, there's a lot of like trying to expedite the learning process and to grow, you know, um, so that I can be a good father and a good husband and a good leader in my community.
Yeah. I think it's good how you framed that up right there. I liked because at the end of the day, sobriety is not drinking. recovery to me is the act of compassionately looking at the box of trauma and suffering and pain and all that, and actually unpacking it. And I think if you want to look at this at the most fundamental and compassionate levels, the 12 steps is a method for unpacking that trauma
Yeah.
in a way that's easy to understand, and then go through to walk out on the other side with some tools, right? And so, but that doesn't mean that the 12 steps are the only way to unpack the trauma. But recovery is just about unpacking it, looking at it, and then surrendering it to God,
Yes.
forgiving yourself and forgiving other people.
Correct. Oh,
And at the
huge.
end of the day, that's what recovery is, being able to look at all that stuff and say, but at the same time, God is good and I'm okay
Yeah.
and you're okay.
Yeah. I
And so
think
if
that,
you've done recovery well, you can say those things, and you can look in the box, and you can look inside someone else's box.
right.
Next Thursday, I'm going to do my fifth step with someone where they're going to sit down and they do all their talking about everything that's happened in their life, everything that they've done, all the stuff. And so, those, a fifth step with somebody to do it thoroughly in our world, it's like 8 to 10 hours.
Yeah. Well,
Of
you're building trust, you're building relationship there. And I believe that's definitely something that has to take place because a lot of us that come out of abuse, right, we have a hard time trusting people, at least trusting people the right way. We do suffer from a form of codependence, right? We're drawn to certain things and we latch on to those certain things that could be very unhealthy. Um,
Well, and that's why what we're doing here is we're trying to say, look, if sobriety is something that you're passionate about, you don't have to subscribe to the AA model. You don't have to subscribe to the 12-step model. I do. At the end of the day, though, if what you're doing is leading you towards a path where you can look at the trauma, you can look at the difficult stuff, and you have a greater sense of compassion and gratitude, then you're probably doing it okay.
yeah,
Probably fine. If you're doing that, and you see a lot of guys, even with guys with 30 years of sobriety in the program, their sobriety is miserable.
right.
Like, but I see some other guys who are dry, who just stop drinking. They're not exactly happy either.
Well, they're not unpacking the issues that brought them to
Exactly. It's not about the drinking. It's
yeah,
not about the codependency. It's not about the drugs. It's not about whatever it is that you're in a 12-step program for. It's not about that. Stopping doing that is the beginning.
right.
Recovery is the unpacking.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter really what your hang up is. You have to be able to look at it in a compassionate way through the eyes of God and then unpack it.
You know,
Period. Whatever it is
and
you're dealing with.
yeah, and that's a patient process. And if you really think about any of our journeys, like we've had a lot of grace in our journeys, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to give that to somebody else, I think the next level up of recovery is, you as a sponsor and I wouldn't know what to title myself, but
So I view a sponsor as somewhere between a friend, a pastor, and a coach.
yeah,
Right. So I would put you into that pastor coach model,
yes.
probably.
So yes. So I think the next level of your sobriety is taking it to the next level to be able to help others achieve theirs, right?
Yes.
I think that that's the journey. I don't think that we're supposed to keep all that to ourselves,
So
right?
the way I talk about it when I talk about it with men specifically is, in the beginning, you're like a vessel. You're like an empty vessel, and it takes a while for your vessel to get filled. And eventually, once your vessel is filled, your goal is to become a pipe that the Spirit of God can just flow right through.
Yep.
But you really have to have this reserve of something that exists inside of it. But eventually, you should just have there should be a constant flow of you know, you're working with somebody and above you, let's say, and you're working with somebody below you, let's say. And the reason for that, let me see if I can get there we go. And the reason for that is because there's something so weird about a chain, like a link in a chain that's not being used.
Mm.
When you see a link in a chain that's just like flapping in the wind, you're like, that thing is like whatever. But as soon as that link is attached to another link, which is attached to another, which is attached to a purpose, it completely makes sense. So the last thing you want to be is the guy who's a link in a chain, but it's not attached to anything. So it has no actual purpose. If you're the end of your chain, i.e., you're not working with someone else, your recovery is half purposeful. Staying sober, sure, that's one thing. But giving it away, that's the other half. And you have to do that to stay sober.
Well, and I think too that in our recovery, and you know this, right, is, being a good husband, right? I know that I didn't have that example as a child, or being a good father, right? Not to strip my dad of what he was trying to do and the lessons he was trying to give me, but now, part of that purpose is to like, hey, let's approach marriage and raising parenthood a little bit different than what I was exposed to. I
Sure.
know this. I know that my kids will have their own experiences in this life, but they don't have to have my experiences and they don't have to see what I saw. You know, those kids want a sober dad and they don't know it yet, right? But they want a sober dad. Um, I tell people all the time that, my life, my ceiling in this life will be my kids' dance floor, right? My goal is to give them so many experiences and love and opportunity, right, that they can start in a different place in their life,
Hmm.
without stripping away their own struggles, right? Because I'll be honest with you, man. Being molested and beaten and rejected and neglected and isolated and addicted, all of it, man, abused, all of it. I wouldn't take any of those experiences away from me because they were great teachers. And now I get to have these amazing conversations and connections with other men where they can be like, I can be like, yo, I get it. I've been there. I've done that. I can connect with that. This is not just literature for me. This is not something I've read out of a book. I'm not a therapist. Like, I'm not trying to, you know what I'm saying? I'm truly connecting to another human being based on the experiences that I've personally had.
Right.
And so, because of those personal experiences, I would never remove them because it allows me a bigger audience of uh, brokenness that I can help guide and assist.
Sure. I think that is true. No, I mean, the Bible says he who's been forgiven much loves much.
Oh yeah, I'm a
Which I mean, which is accurate
yeah,
on many levels.
yeah,
And it certainly gives you a lens of compassion to be able to be able to keep looking at it. One of the things that we say in my business is compassion is the slowest way to get anything done, but it's
yeah.
also the best way to get something done.
And those stronger relationships, right?
Well,
Long,
compassion, it means in the Greek, it means to suffer with.
yeah,
Passion, suffer, and come means, the joining. So to suffer with someone, to truly suffer with someone and to walk through it with someone, that's that other component of recovery. Not only am I sober from the thing itself, not only have I experienced liberation from the obsession of the thing itself, I'm also at a place where I can be around it and have it not kill me. You know what I mean?
right. Well,
Like I can be
dude, that is, I'm just gonna love what we do, man. One of the greatest struggles that I see in the field of recovery right now. Um, it's kind of like recovery coaching. Imagine someone wanting to be a sponsor way too quickly, right? And recovery coaching, what I've seen a lot of is individuals that haven't unpacked a lot of their stuff and they're engaging in someone else's suffering, which now brings up their suffering that was unresolved, and then they fall off the wagon. They go back to the old ways. It's too heavy for them. So they have like this savior rescuer complex, right? And part of their codependency, like now I
Yeah, we
gotta
call it
do this.
Captain Save-A-Ho.
Captain Save or Save a Bro, Captain Save a Bro,
Save it, bro.
right?
Yeah, I like it.
Captain, right? Same thing, right? It's
Yeah.
different environment. So, yeah, I think it's important to address your suffering. Again, so that goes back to like, I'm grateful for my suffering because now I can go suffer with somebody else, right? Um, I've actually been given a platform or an opportunity to where I am working with individuals that are like dual diagnosis, schizophrenic, like bipolar, like, they live in transitional homes, assisted living. Dude, the deep, deep trauma that every single one of these souls it makes me very humble in my experiences. Because human nature, we'll go back to, we compare naturally. I'm like, well, I never went through that. Like, you know, but this next level of compassion and connecting with people in their suffering when you haven't even suffered what they suffered, that's a whole nother level, man.
Well, and that's where so two elements of I think like comparison, right? So scripturally speaking, those who compare themselves to themselves among themselves are not wise,
Yep.
right? Which is a great one from Paul. And then Chesterton, maybe it's Chesterton, I can't remember. I think so. No, it's someone else. It's FDR's wife. That's who it was. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes, yes, 100%. It
Okay,
truly is.
so essentially, it doesn't matter what your story is. And that's what I keep trying to say to my COVID bro, who's like, yeah, he's like, my final night of drinking was just me hanging out with my friend with a bottle of Gentleman Jack, and my wife just got sick of it. Next thing I know, I'm intervention and she's throwing me in a rehab. And he's like, I didn't even do anything wrong. But he's like, and then I look at him, I'm like, but was alcohol the controlling and factor of your life? Was every moment of your life revolved around when your next drink was going to occur? And he's like, absolutely. I was definitely in the death grips. And it's like, you don't need your story to be the most catastrophic of catastrophic things.
Correct.
And that's
Correct.
why I'm, and in the AA side of things, that's why I like the primary purpose, because it's not about the comparison of, whose story is worse. So like in our
Yeah,
group, if there's a
yeah.
guy who shows up and he's like, I'm the most religious person in the entire world,
Uh.
right? I'm the guy that gets sent to the most religious man in the world who says this recovery thing can't work for me because I know God and you don't know God. I'm the guy they send. Now, if there's like somebody that's like who's in the like drug abuse side of things, I'm not the guy to send because I don't have drug abuse in my story, right?
Yeah,
But there is a guy in our group that if you are like, I've done the most drugs in the whole world, then know that this guy over here, trust me, this is the guy
yeah.
that this is the guy that's going to one up you on that. And
Right. Right.
we all have the like, you know, you stole one car. Well, this guy stole 50 cars.
Well,
Like,
I think, but a lot of that is driven from, the need for validation, right? Well, like my story is much greater than your story.
you're not
For us
that
that
special.
suffered, levels of rejection of the kid and carry that through our lives. Like
Yeah.
now we're chasing validation, and then we develop a victim mindset. So on more of a clinical side, or it's a victim mindset, more in a biblical, spiritual, it's self-loathing, right? And then we feed all
Yeah.
that.
So
you
what
know
all that leads to is this sense that I am unique.
yes.
That when God shows up to me, God is somehow insufficient for my needs. Great that he's sufficient for yours. He's still insufficient for mine.
Right.
And that's where a lot of people, and we'll kind of wrap it up here. That's where a lot of people get into trouble. Where they get in trouble is thinking that they are unique, that they are somehow that the solutions that have worked, that the vital spiritual experiences that have worked in the past for 12-step people and non-12-step people alike, that somehow they're somehow special out of all of
They have it
humanity.
all figured out, right? So, I've been on the receiving end of personal attacks based on how my recovery has unpacked. But I also know that even in the church will attack those that are struggling in their recovery and their addiction because they have all the answers, right? And
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of that from a lot of camps. So I'm
yeah.
just not like,
Well, and that's the problem with both of these camps. So you have like this church camp that says, we have all the answers, and then you have the recovery camp that says, no, we have all the answers. And it's like, look, guys,
You're very
it could be that the answer lies in the individual having a spiritual experience with God, wherein they are able to receive the forgiveness of God and are able to forgive others.
correct.
Maybe both of these are tools for an individual to have that experience.
Right.
And then from there, that's the beginning of sobriety.
Absolutely.
Recovery is just, what do you do after that?
100%. I just know that a big part of our mission is us trying to connect with people, and hey, where you're at in your recovery, hey, let's just keep walking it out together. Whatever modalities that you choose that help you move into a direction that's healthier for you, let's do that. Let's keep doing that,
Let's do that.
and let's do it together.
Absolutely. All right, Rob, I love you, man.
Love you, man.
So, yeah, if you have any questions for Rob or you can leave it in the comments below, I guess. Otherwise, you have a wonderful day, wonderful Saturday. We should do this more.
We're going to do this more. So why don't you tell our lovely friends what we're doing from here on out with this?
I think what we're really doing here is we're just saying, look, like, this is about sobriety. It's about recovery, and it's about honoring the process that many different processes, like, if in AA you're allowed to have different higher powers, then there should be different modes of sobriety.
Right.
That lead to a spiritual experience. And I think the banner that we're under is, we're about developing a walk with God, about developing a spiritual way of living that allows us to forgive ourselves and forgive others, that allows us to recognize that my self-will didn't change it for me, but I learned how to surrender, and I learned how to bring it all in, and I learned how to teach someone else to surrender. And that's pretty much it. And so this is just a podcast for you and I to have some fun, mostly talk about God.
Yeah, we can talk about our different experiences, because what we also want to do is we want to bring to light, our experiences, because we know other people have had those experiences, because ultimately we want to encourage people to stick to that, the recovery, righteous recovery, man. Let's,
that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
As long as your recovery is cloaked in love and affection, it's probably working.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's so it's not about Bible thumping. It's not about big book thumping.
It's not about my way is better than your way, right?
No.
My way is the only way, right?
No, and you and I have been friends now for a couple of years, and I find both of our versions of sobriety to be great.
I agree.
I'm personally happy with both. It's good for me to be around you. It's good for me to be around a non-big book kind of 12-step. I was going to say a 12-thumper, 12-step guy.
Yeah.
It's nice to not be around that. Well, because I go to meetings and I like all that stuff. But you know what? Sometimes it gets a little strict, or it gets a little like, well, you're not doing it the way they did it 60 years ago. And I'm like, well, I get that.
Yeah.
But some things do change. But on your side, you've come to me and you've been like, hey, man, like, I've been in the church, and the church is, it's just, they're not doing it.
I've struggled in the church and their processes, and I've struggled with 12-steppers and their approach, and their like name calling almost. I mean, the shaming of my process. And to meet somebody that has the love of God in there, that understands how other people within that demographic can be, and be like, yo, I get it, I'm not like that, let's come together, let's talk about those things, and let's live life together. What I'm saying? There's
so
no
this podcast is really about sobriety, and it's about it doesn't matter what version you subscribe to, and it's hopefully it's about learning from each other as well.
Correct. So with that being said, ladies,
Rob and Drew's Adventures in Sobriety.
There it is. Let's go.
All right, man. I love you. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.